June 4, 1979, Ghana, Burma Camp. In the early hours of June 4th, the tension was so great that someone in Burma Camp performed the ritualistic act of killing himself. The next moment, the whole place erupted. Soldiers and civilians residing in the barracks were awoken to gunshots from the 5th Battalion of Infantry. The first Jerry Rawlings knew of it was at approximately 5:30 a.m. when a handful of men smashed the lock of his cell door in the Special Branch headquarters. The soldiers then ran with him to the nearby broadcasting house, which had already been seized by men of the 5th Battalion. In a spate of breathless excitement, he shouted into the microphones, "This is Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings. The ranks have just gotten me out of my prison cell. In other words, the ranks have taken over the destiny of this country." At about 8 a.m., the army commander could not take the announcement of a takeover. His first line of action was to speak to the troops. Through the commanding officer, orders were given to one Major Ibrahim Ryder to secure the broadcasting house. In other words, Major Ryder was to recapture the broadcasting house from the hands of the 5th Battalion troops, or so-called revolutionaries. Upon arrival, the Reki troops fired their armored tank guns onto the gates and walls of the broadcasting house. The revolutionary soldiers guarding the gates escaped as a result of the firepower being unleashed by the armored tanks. The broadcasting house was secured with an announcement made on air. That was a signal for the army commander, Major General Odate Wellington, to come to the broadcasting house. He arrived at the broadcasting house with Rear Admiral Joy Amedume, the Chief of Naval Staff. He made two announcements. In the first announcement, he ordered officers and men of the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council to return to their respective units while steps were being taken to return the armed forces to normalcy.
This morning has been curled. I am hereby ordering all officers and men of the Ghana Armed Forces to return to their respective units. Steps are being taken to restore the armed forces to normalcy. All officers and men of the Ghana Armed Forces, I repeat, are to report back to their respective units, whilst steps are being taken to protect life and property. I would like to assure all citizens to go about their normal duties whilst the SMC is taking all measures to ensure that life and property are protected. I would also like to add that all officers and men, whether they were actively involved in the uprising or not, are to report back to their units, whilst steps are being taken to iron out any grievances or any alleged injustices.
In the second announcement, he invited Flight Lieutenant Rawlings and his colleagues to come to the brigade headquarters for a possible and amicable solution to any grievances they may have.
Fellow countrymen, I have come to the studio once again, this time to make a special appeal to all members of the armed forces. I urge all ranks who are armed to cease firing forthwith. I also urge Flight Lieutenant Rawlings and any following whom he has with him, to meet me at headquarters, 1st Infantry Brigade, Beshi Ridge. I give you all the full assurance that there will be no victimization nor arrest of any sort whatsoever. All other personnel are to report to their respective units as previously instructed. All flights by Air Force planes are to cease. I urge you all to cooperate fully to enable speedy normalization of the situation. Thank you.
From there, the Army Commander and the Chief of Naval Staff left the broadcasting house and proceeded to the brigade headquarters, where he held brief indoor meetings with some senior officers. The unexpected happened when a special Radio Ghana announced at 3 p.m. that the revolutionaries were back in control of the broadcasting house. The Major General, being a senior formidable officer, was a target of the mutinous soldiers. He wanted to go to the den of the mutineers, the captured broadcasting house, to address the excited soldiers. But he would change his plans and resign himself to the police headquarters with his men. At about late afternoon, an unidentified voice came on air. All SMC2 officials taking refuge in the police headquarters should vacate the building because the place was earmarked for bombardment. At the same time, Air Force jets were sent flying very low over the police headquarters. Another unidentified voice announced, "Let no man underestimate the anger that has passed through the fabric of the armed forces." Realizing how hopeless the situation had become, the Army Commander decided to get into one of his armored vehicles to vacate the police headquarters. He was offered an escort according to Major Ibrahim Ryder, but refused. He departed with his ADC and bodyguard to the Nima police station, which was about 1,000 yards from the police headquarters. The reason for choosing the Nima police station was unclear, but the aide-de-camp to the Army Commander explained that they went there to use their communication gadgets, which they felt was very secured, as those used by the army had been intercepted by the revolutionaries. At the Nima police station, the Army Commander, his bodyguard, and the aide-de-camp got off the armored vehicle and entered the office of the commanding officer for the station. He spoke to the commander and briefed him about the ongoing situation. It also became obvious to them that the police officers there had also deserted the station. From the police commander's office, where they were holding discussions, stood the view of the ring road, which had soldiers driving around and shooting in the air. At approximately 4 p.m., one of the vehicles carrying the shooting soldiers branched off the ring road and entered the Nima police station. The soldiers lined up and started firing indiscriminately into the police station. The firing was very intense, so the army commander, the bodyguard, and the ADC had to take cover. The firing continued for a few minutes. On the account of the ADC, the general raised his head to have a view of the situation. It was at this point that a bullet struck him in the throat. He fell down, gasping for breath. In his wounded state, he managed to say these words to his ADC. "ADC, surrender." The ADC therefore shouted to the shooting soldiers outside that they were willing to surrender. They stopped firing and entered the station. The ADC also informed the soldiers that the general was wounded and needed medical attention. Ignoring the ADC, one of the soldiers opened fire into his back using an automated submachine gun SMG. He was lying face down. bullets fired were uncountable. The soldiers then took his headgear, waved it, and began shouting, "Udarte is dead! Udarte is dead! Udarte is dead! Udarte is dead!" Still firing and waving his headgear. In the words of the ADC, it was an execution. It is believed that soldiers who were part of the uprising spotted the police armored vehicle driving past the front of the broadcasting house towards the direction of the Kwame Nkrumah Circle. The soldiers also drove towards that direction, shooting indiscriminately into the air. When they got to the junction of the Nima police station, bystanders informed them of the presence of the army commander. Given his resistance to the uprising, he was given a full military burial worthy of his rank